Welcome to the Radical Rhythm Podcast. This has been created for those of us that love radical women who live perhaps by the rules, but also question and challenge the status quo. We want more from our lives, to enjoy our sexuality, to explore radical thought, and to celebrate women who have lived and continue to live unconventional lives. Hi, I'm Dr. Toni Bear, sexologist, educator, activist, and definitely a radical woman. Thank you for joining me as I share stories of women challenging the status quo and living life to the fullest. Join me as we unapologetically march to the beat of a different drummer together. Welcome to episode number 3. This one is about Aphrodite. And who better to talk about Aphrodite with than the person that introduced me to the book in the first place, Ms. Viola Johnson. Ms. Viola Johnson lives in Evansville, Indiana. She is the director of the Carter Johnson Leather Library and Collection. In her rare book room, back in October 2020, I discovered this book called Aphrodite. Today we talk about that book and celebrate our sexuality together. Please welcome Viola Johnson. Well, welcome to another broadcast of Radical Rhythm. Once again, I have my favorite guest, Ms. Viola Johnson from the Carter Johnson Library in Evansville, Indiana. How you doing, Vi?
It is good. Today's a good day.
Always good. Always good to be with you. Today, we're going to talk about a book that I just happened upon in the rare room of the library next door. One of Vi's favorite things to do to her friends is to put them in the rare book room and ask them to sit there and find something. And my eyes automatically went to this book called Aphrodite. What has been your experience, other than reading it a long time ago, with this book, Vi? Where does it come from? Why is it in that rare book room?
Well, that's a quick game of tic-tac, 20 connections and 6 degrees of separation. Pierre Louys was a writer who revered women and had some serious fantasies about women-to-women sex. His first book, The Daughters of Bilitis, or Bidylus, depending on how you want to write it, he claimed he found an original manuscript for that has really hot lesbian sex in it, to find out that it wasn't a manuscript he transcribed. It was a manuscript he actually wrote. And then his second one was called Aphrodite, also based on the Greek myths, the great images of the goddess of love, all of the problems that love can get you into. And in the story, in this case, it was how one man succumbed to the charms of love and then found out that, everything he dreamed about wasn't exactly what he expected. Hence, the mischief of Aphrodite.
Wow. When I looked at it, I'm sitting in the leather library in the rare book room, and I looked at the book title Aphrodite and I thought love goddess. And, I've started this consulting and coaching program called The Voyages of Aphrodite. Let me check out this book about Aphrodite. And I was absolutely surprised when I looked at the book and started reading it that it was not a description of the goddess. It was not a book about Greek mythology. This was a 19th century French erotic novel.
It was also, to some extent, a morals tale. Let's talk about that character you love so much. Let's talk about Aphrodite and all of the mischief she got into. Okay, the origin story we're not going to get into. Who was she actually the daughter of? But she was so beautiful that every one of the Olympian men lusted after her. Her father, theoretically Zeus, figured he would cool her order by marrying her to not the handsomest thing on Olympus to try and cool her down. Didn't work. She was still dealing with the favors of every Olympian and half the mortal men in Greece. She didn't care. Love is love, and love, what does the poet say? Seeks itself.
Wow. So are you telling me that this was a story, this story of the Greek goddess Aphrodite was a story of a woman that had sexual freedom and lived life on her own terms. So she might be one of the first female characters in history that lived her own life on her own terms sexually.
Because nothing calmed her down. Now, when we talk about Pierre Louys' Aphrodite, the lead character was very much portrayed in the image of the goddess. She was the most beautiful thing in Athens, where this story takes place. She is a courtesan, which means every wealthy man might have access to her favors if she decided they were worthy, but only if she decided. So along comes a poor sculptor, relatively poor sculptor, who desires her. And, what do you have to offer me? I have kings, I have nobles, I have anyone I want. Why should I pay attention to you? How very much like the goddess that she is portrayed to be. Aphrodite pretty much did the same thing.
What was an interesting twist in the tale, though, was that the top suitor, the number one suitor to the high priestess of Isis in Alexandria, in Egypt, this top male suitor was the one who actually bumped into our what would you call the primary character of the story, and fell for her immediately instead of the descendants of the pharaohs of Egypt. He actually falls for the courtesan.
Mhm.
So she asked him to do 3 favors for her, which were diabolical.
They weren't exactly favors as much as they were tests.
So a man submitted to her and actually accomplished these 3 tasks, which were pretty nasty.
Illegal might be the word you're looking for.
Yeah, or murder, perhaps, theft.
Major theft, especially when you're stealing something off the statue of the patron goddess of the area.
Right, right. And then after he does these 3 things, she falls in love with him.
That's where the writer puts his own thoughts into this.
Right. And she falls in love with him, and he turns around and dumps her.
But why? Think about that. He dumps her because he's suddenly ashamed of his own actions. But that's where the human side comes in versus the goddess. The goddess wouldn't have cared. You
True.
did 3 favors for me. I will give you what you ask. And then, by the way, go away, little boy. We're done. It became a human tale when it flipped and she fell in love with him. But he's now looking at all of the things he did, going, oh my God, what have I done for love? Which is a question that gets asked a lot.
What I found interesting is at the end, the sculptor was sculpting Aphrodite and saw her and realized she was Aphrodite.
Yes.
But should we ruin the ending?
Nope.
Oh, we won't tell them what happens
Nope.
at the very end. I chose this story by chance. I didn't choose this story out of free will. You put me in that room and I saw the book Aphrodite and I fell in love with this story, and it just, it absolutely messed with my mind because I am working with women in being their own goddess and women to have the love that they want, as in the story. But when I read that this story was written by a 19th century French heterosexual man, and it had all this hot lesbian sex in it and women's free will, it blew me away.
But there is that little bit of humanity in there. Like I said, suddenly guilt comes in. Now, I'm going to back you up and let's have this talk frankly. The real reason you love Aphrodite is because you love shenanigans.
I do.
And
I do. I'll put my head down.
there is no greater shenanigator than Aphrodite was.
Why?
Well, first things first, let's go back to that free will issue and the idea of enjoying pleasure for the joy of pleasure without moral ties, without guilt. It is love, it is sex, it feels good, it's emotionally freeing. I should have it in any way that pleases me. There tends to be a little bit of fallout behind that because that is the nature of that particular freedom. Yeah, you've got guy number one, guy number two, guy number six, guy number three, four, and five, all following you around like puppies and being willing to do damn near anything to win your favor. Now, come on, if it's just straight sex, you give, you take. But haven't you ever had a little devil creep up in there and go, huh, so what's it worth to you?
Yes. The devil. Always the devil.
Okay, a little demon. Maybe an angel with a mischievous smile. But the minute you get into what's it worth to you, women get to exert that feminine will. And because of beauty, allure, sex, charm, whatever it is that has driven men to chase women since the beginning of time, when she exerts that question, what's it worth to you? She's not only dealing with her own free will, she's exercising power that most of the time she wouldn't think about. And once that power gets tossed out, what will you do for me?
It's amazing. The story is amazing. And I had to find out more about this guy. Who is Pierre Louys? Why did he write about Greece? Why did he write about Egypt? Why did he write about Aphrodite? Why did he have all these hot lesbian scenes in this book? And, I went down a rabbit hole, Vi, and I looked at French culture in the late 19th century. I know, and try to figure it out. I want to share some things I haven't told you yet. One, I found out that the camera, the photograph machine of the time, was invented in 1839 in France. And within a year, the first series of porno pictures were being sold on the streets of France. And the first pictures were lesbian encounters.
Mm-hmm.
So the porno that was being made with the camera that was just invented started in France. And they remarked at that time that it was so expensive to buy these photos that you could hire a prostitute for an entire day for the price of one of these photos. And it grew from there. Within 10 years, by 1860, there were 400 pornographic shops selling porno in Paris. In fact, one of the most frequent places to buy porno was not actually in a shop, was by through meeting women in the train stations. Under her skirt, she would have sets of 5 photos that you could buy. So the late 1800s in France is full of porno. And the pictures of these sets of 5, you could buy a set that is they considered homosexual or heterosexual. And the heterosexual picture collage of the 5 pictures included, and let me read this off to you, it included a popular sense of lesbians, but the heterosexual packs included poses, oral sex, anal sex, and light bondage. In the late 1800s, that's what you would
Kinky.
buy from under the skirts of women selling these packs in the train stations. When you think about this period of time that Louis is writing, it is the beginning of celebration of overt sexuality through a realistic sense rather than pictures or sculptures. Now we're seeing sex realistically and shared amongst folks easily. And this late 1800s is a celebration of culture in general. When I dug deeper, I found out that Pierre Louys' best friend in college was Andre Gide, who happened to be a well-known, Nobel Prize winner, a
And
literary,
gay.
and very gay. So Louis was hanging out with his best friend Andre and friends like Oscar Wilde and Claude Debussy, and which led to the writings of Pierre Louis being put to music. It's all connected.
And now it raises another interesting question in that, other than the writings of Oscar Wilde, and we see some of the morals tales there, Debussy was known for his affairs with men and was still transcribing and setting to music Greek myths about women. Talk about the power of women with any man.
Right. And the purpose of this podcast is a celebration of radical women. And this idea of radicalization of women's sexuality is not a new thought. And these men, their writings, their music, even Toulouse-Lautrec is painting lesbian prostitutes in Paris at this time.
Versus the courtesan. And you and I were talking before about the difference between the prostitute and the courtesan. Yes, it is in the clientele, no arguments. But I believe, in my humble opinion only, one of the big differences is simply giving a man what he wants for money, which is what the prostitute does, no harm, no foul, versus manipulating the man who can afford to give anything and getting more from him than just his money. The right courtesan controls him. The wallet is almost immaterial because what she's controlling is his power.
Absolutely. So I just find this whole period fascinating. I find that book fascinating. I never thought that when I saw the cover called Aphrodite, that this is where this conversation was going to go. I have since bought the book because now I need it on my shelf to look at and smile and remind me of visiting the Carter Johnson Library and one of the many, many treasures that are here to discover. So I thank you for placing me in timeout in the rare book room. Now, I want to turn the conversation to today because, you know, so this is a fascinating book. This is a fascinating history. But what does it have to do with us today in 2021? And what does this have to do with radical women? And what does this have to, what lessons are there, Vi? I know this is a hard question. What lessons are there for us as sexual beings that we can take forth?
Do you really want to turn me loose on that? The
I
last
do.
2 minutes of this?
Actually, 10.
Okay, here goes. Gonna toss one out to you, Dr. Toni. Our grandmothers and great grandmothers were worshipped more as the courtesan. We have become the prostitute. We are willing to settle for giving away sex to qualify for the picket fence, the 2.2 kids, and the provider. Our great grandmother would have said, "You have power in your femininity. You have the power to be in control and still get what you want." Look at Aphrodite. She controlled every male Titan and Olympian because of her beauty, and she knew how to use it. She got what she wanted because she controlled her own power. She didn't just give it away. It wasn't that she settled. She demanded the best, and she got it because she knew how to use what she had, not just her beauty, but her brains as well, and the power that goes along with being a woman. How far from that have we gotten? And isn't it time to take it back?
Wow. Wow. So, one lesson I'm hearing you say is don't settle. How about the question of cultural literacy in general? Like, is part of a woman's power her brain and her self-education? It doesn't have to be formal education, but self-education.
Bingo. It's that knowledge of who you are. Um, Maya Angelou said in her poem, "It's the way I walk, it's the way I talk, it's the way I carry myself. Radical, powerful woman am I." And the plainest bell at the ball can straighten her shoulders, put her aura out, and people are attracted to it. Look at Cleopatra. She wasn't all that pretty. She was, however, brilliant, fluent in 6 languages or 7, depending on who's telling the tale, very much aware of her brains, and could charm the pants off of anything that got near her.
Yeah. Yeah. As I read about Alexandria and the story of Aphrodite being set in Alexandria, and I went back and looked at this was the last um, pharaoh of part of the dynasty that came from Alexander and the Greeks. And the seduction of the priestess, the high priestess who worshipped Isis, and the connection between Isis as a feminine goddess and prototype as well, or archetype, as well as Aphrodite. It's all in one.
Yes, Aphrodite, Venus, and Isis, depending on your country, we're all the same woman.
Right, right. And wow, what a story. And what a place that we ended up, by looking at the story itself, looking at Greece, and then moving to France and looking at French culture and heterosexual males and female seductresses and the difference between seducing and settling and
Bingo.
demanding the life that you want to live and using your femininity as your power.
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, Vi, as always, it is absolutely wonderful hanging out with you. And there are always lessons to learn and rabbit holes to go down and learn.
Hmm.
And what's amazing is the depth of learning. Like you read a story and you learn the obvious concrete lesson that is being thrown at you in the literature. And then through critical analysis, we can look at the story on a deeper level.
True.
But
Very true.
but then looking at the culture at the time that it's written and the culture of the time that it's embedded, and then looking at that history and culture and what's going on at that same time helps explain that piece of literature in so much more depth. And then trying to figure out, last but not least, well, what does this mean in the 21st century? What does this mean for us? What does this mean for radical women today and tomorrow? Is is powerful. Reading is powerful. Books are powerful.
The radical woman herself is powerful. The powerful woman is radical. She doesn't settle. She won't. She knows her value and refuses to, as the old folks say, cast pearls before swine. Pearls belong to kings. And if you are not a king, move on.
Wow. So there you go. Folks that are listening to this, lesson for the day. No pearls, no stay. Is that what we're saying?
No king, no stay either.
Yeah. Don't settle for less than your king. Vi, thank you so much for sitting down. We are going to be meeting next month as well, and we're going to be talking about free love in Kansas next month.
Yep, we're going to be talking about a woman that doesn't get the credit she deserves, a woman named Lillian Harmon, who had the guts to tell the entire U.S. government to take a flying leap. I will love who I choose.
Wow, I look forward to it. So, as some of you know, this is going to be an episode next month because I need a couple weeks to read to catch up to Vi in any way that I can, so that we can actually have an intelligent conversation. I do know of the woman, but I don't know the story yet. So
Most don't.
yeah, I can't wait to learn. So thank you so much. And for those of you who have not subscribed to our channel, please click below and subscribe so that you don't miss the next exciting episode of Radical Rhythm. Thank you, Vi. Thank you so much for tuning in today to the Radical Rhythm podcast. Special thanks to Ms. Vi Johnson of the Leather Library and Collection in Evansville, Indiana. The group that I mentioned, The Voyages of Aphrodite, is a free Facebook group. If you are female identified and interested in talking about your sexuality and being amongst other women who are also interested in empowering one another, please find it on Facebook or on the link below and join the group. It's free. You might also see that there's another group, the Voyagers of Aphrodite. It's called the Voyagers Club Inner Circle. This group is a paid subscription program, and it's a place where I go in every month and hold seminars based upon the challenges that are being faced amongst the women in the group. This is also a group dedicated to working on their sexuality and specifically bringing joy into their life. And it truly brings me joy to work with them almost on a daily basis within our group. If you're interested, again, there is a link below. Last but not least, if you like the Radical Rhythm podcast, it's free. It's on YouTube and soon to be on Spotify and Apple and SoundCloud. Please click the button below, subscribe, so that you don't miss the next episode. Thank you very much for listening. I look forward to talking to you once again from the Carter Johnson Leather Library next week.